Only 1 hour remained before the ship exploded. A helicopter appeared in the middle of the night sea, but it had only 9 seats for the dozens of billionaires trapped on board. The price of each seat quickly soared from a few million to tens of billions of dollars, turning the auction of lives into a ruthless struggle between the most powerful. But even more terrifying was that the mastermind behind this game had planned everything long in advance. 2 days earlier, the Collier family had hosted a party on their luxurious yacht. The invited guests were all top-tier elites. Therefore, the ship's manager, Teddy, summoned all the staff for emergency training. The head of the family, Lawrence Collier, and his wife Catherine organized this trip because he was about to retire. Their son, Trip, was addicted to gambling and a life of debauchery. Their daughter, Anna, had married a woman whose reputation among the elite was tarnished. However, she was very capable in her work. Lawrence intends to pass the CEO position to her. With such an important family, it's essential to have a private lawyer and a pastor with political standing accompanying them. Of course, they'll also bring along their son, who's famous on social media. The future partner of the Collier family is the Chun family. Their representative is Celia, who runs Morning Glory Capital. She will invest a large sum of money in Collier's company and bring along her personal bodyguard, Rufus. He was once a globally renowned detective whose work was sought after by major television networks. However, in recent years, his reputation has declined due to a few incidents. The Collier family is somewhat dissatisfied with the Chun family's approach. They feel that having a detective under the guise of a bodyguard shows a lack of trust. On occasions like this, of course, support from the governor of Washington is indispensable. Keith, Tripp's financial advisor, and Imogene, Anna's close friend, are also present. 18 years ago, her mother was murdered. Afterward, she was raised by the Collier family and given a comfortable life. Just as Teddy finished introducing the distinguished guests, a servant arrived late. It was Winnie, Teddy's only younger sister. Because of their sisterly relationship, Teddy only scolded her briefly. As soon as Imogene boarded the train, she bumped into Rufus. The two had a deep connection. The case of her mother's murder 18 years ago was investigated by Detective Rufus. At that moment, the girl nervously clutched her scarf as she answered questions. She recalled the day her mother insisted she get off the train. A few minutes later, the train exploded, killing her instantly and leaving her with a deep psychological trauma. Rufus had promised to reveal the truth to Imogene, but after 3 months of investigation, he only found one suspect named Victor, a fake name. Then, for some unknown reason, Rufus suddenly stopped investigating, and they never met again. Imogene always believed Rufus was a fraud. Suddenly, a man named Sunil greeted Imogene. She immediately recognized him as the owner of the yacht. After a brief conversation, she hurried to find Anna. The CEO appointment ceremony was less than a minute away, and everyone was anxiously awaiting it. But when Lawrence gave his speech, he didn't mention anything about transferring the position to his daughter. Anna's hopes were dashed. Imogene didn't have time to comfort Anna, as she had more important things to do. Earlier that day, Winnie had accidentally spilled wine on Keith's designer watch and was subjected to his venomous insults. Outraged and wanting justice for Winnie, Imogene went to Keith's room. He sarcastically remarked that despite living in luxury, she was merely a shadow beside Anna, completely lacking the class to stand on. She was speechless. On her way out, she took his room key. That night, she sneaked into his room, targeting the watch on his bedside table. She smashed it several times, shattering it completely. Having accomplished her goal, she quietly left the room. Looking up, she noticed that the hallway was equipped with surveillance cameras, but she wasn't afraid. She calmly returned to the main hall. Seeing Rufus chatting with the tycoons, she approached him, but he completely failed to recognize her. Angrily, she threw her glass of wine in his face. Jules, the head of security on the ship, immediately came to escort her away. Afterward, they spent a passionate night together. The next morning, while they were having breakfast, Jules received news that Keith had been murdered. A harpoon had been thrust straight into his stomach. When Imogene heard this, she panicked. She rushed to the surveillance room to delete the video, but the entire 7 minutes before and after she entered and exited the room had been erased. Clearly, someone had acted first. What shocked her even more was that Rufus was already waiting for her in the room, holding the deleted video. International police would be on board to investigate. If this footage were released within the next 24 hours, she would undoubtedly become the prime suspect. She didn't know how to prove her innocence. Surprisingly, Rufus proactively offered to help her. The reason was simple. He had remembered who she was. From a young age, she had a natural talent for investigation. Her memory and observational skills were exceptional. As soon as she entered the crime scene, she smelled the disinfectant left behind by the cleaning staff. This meant the room had been cleaned before Keith's murder was discovered. Who knows if the crime scene had been tampered with? The cleaning staff described the horrific scene and the strong, pungent smell, but she refused to admit what she had seen. Imogene was about to ask further questions when the manager interrupted her. Having no other choice, Rufus Rufus guided Imogene to recall the details of the night of the crime. She remembered leaving her card aside when she entered the room. She also briefly saw a green shirt on a chair. Besides that, she couldn't remember anything else. Rufus patiently explained that human memories are easily influenced. Most witnesses unintentionally distort the truth. With Rufus's encouragement, Imogene remembered that the shirt was actually on a trolley. The trolley was how the killer entered and exited the room. He hid in the trolley, waiting for the staff to push it back to the work area. From that, the trolley's movement could be determined. It stopped a total of 4 times. The housekeeping staff had placed empty plates on it. The door was always open and could be entered at any time. All that was needed was to investigate the security camera footage to see who had passed by at the time of the crime. But Imogene realized Rufus had already reviewed the footage. He was making her recall it simply to hone her skills. His autobiography contained crucial details. Relying solely on eyesight wouldn't guarantee success. Therefore, he always worked with an assistant. Imogene suddenly remembered meeting his assistant 18 years ago. That person was Keith, the man who had just been murdered. Their presence on the yacht was absolutely no coincidence. 6 months ago, Keith received crucial news. The Collier family was recruiting outside investors and preparing to release their internal company records. At that point, they would be able to uncover the connection between Victor and the Collier family. Victor was the mysterious figure who murdered Imogene's mother. He enjoyed the ruthless, throat-cutting method of murder. Imogene's mother was then a secretary for the Collier family. She wasn't actually his real target. The person he wanted to warn was Lawrence. Lawrence had kept the accounting system tightly locked, and for now, no evidence could be found. When Rufus saw a picture of the grown-up Imogene, his resolve was rekindled. He wanted to fulfill the promise he made to Imogene 18 years ago with Keith. Perhaps Victor discovered their plan and acted first, killing Keith and stealing the ledger. However, instead of acting immediately, they decided to question the people on the ship. Imogene quietly handed Anna half a card, silently observing the subtle expressions on everyone's faces. Lawrence refused to be questioned. The idiotic bodyguard stood guard at the door. Even Imogene wasn't allowed in. The family's private lawyer refused to cooperate with the investigation. He even made a very rude gesture. However, Rufus noticed a scar on his wrist. Both the Collier and Chun families claimed ignorance of the killer's methods. They also had little connection to the victim in real life. But Anna's wife, Layla, had previously clashed with Keith because he had framed her. She had been in a car accident a few years prior, making her suspicious. After boarding the ship, she felt Keith was constantly watching her. She showed signs of mental instability and a potential murderous intent. However, she insisted that she was still in her room with Anna at the time of the crime and had never left. Outwardly, the Chun and Collier families were investment partners. But in reality, the Chun family had already investigated the Collier family's financial situation, which was on the verge of bankruptcy. There were also rumors of a romantic relationship between the two families. Celia's granddaughter had once been in a relationship with Anna of the Collier family, but they were now ex-lovers. The Collier family's pastor had introduced Keith to the governor at 4 p.m. that day. A heated argument ensued between them, related to the governor's secret bribery. Teddy also didn't understand why the victim had brought the harpoon gun to her room. Winnie had been humiliated by Keith during the day. She was very humble, saying that it was normal for her to be scolded because she hadn't served well enough. Teddy quickly spoke up to defend her younger sister. Since their mother's death, she had taken on the responsibility of caring for Winnie. To her, Winnie was not just a sister, but like a daughter. While sitting near someone in the large hall, Imogene was interrupted by Sunil. He was displeased to see the detective treat everyone like a suspect. But given the murder on the ship, this man seemed to be hiding something. Anna was intelligent, so she easily saw through Imogene's lies. Under Rufus's arrangement, Imogene didn't hide the fact that they were cooperating on the investigation. She also needed Anna's help to gain access to Lawrence's office. Lawrence was the only one who refused to be questioned. Only Imogene, secretly investigating, had any hope of finding clues from the records and uncovering the truth behind the two murders spanning 18 years. While Imogene and Rufus were analyzing the case, Sunil proactively provided a clue. Before the murders, Keith had tried to break into Lawrence's office. When discovered, he pretended to have entered the wrong room and left. Keith wanted to get inside because there was a secret safe. During the recent interrogation, Rufus had noticed many irregularities. The governor-in-chief had a secret relationship that couldn't be revealed. The lawyer and Teddy exchanged a coded briefcase. Layla's gaze was evasive. Anna repeatedly lied to cover for her. The dealings between the Collier and Chun families involved tens of billions of dollars. All of them had a motive to kill Keith. However, no one had yet revealed any weaknesses. Early the next morning, International Agent Hilda arrived at the scene. She carefully re-examined the entire sequence of events. The killer hadn't brought a weapon into the room himself. This suggested he hadn't intended to kill from the start. It was likely a dispute that led to the murder. But Rufus disagreed. Because there were no signs of resistance on the body, it indicated there was no struggle at the scene. The two went to the crime scene together. The killer meticulously wiped away all fingerprints. The victim's diary had been stolen. Perhaps it contained the motive for the crime. And the designer watch that Imogene had smashed was considered important evidence by Hilda. Adding to that, the CCTV footage was deleted. Imogene's situation was now extremely dangerous. She had to be one step ahead of Hilda to find evidence proving her innocence. Rufus's appearance put the governor in a difficult position. In fact, he had received a notification from the Political Action Group that a secret donor had asked him to maintain good relations with Keith. On the day of the crime, the governor himself had requested that champagne be delivered to Keith's room by trolley. Now they discovered the killer used that very trolley. But Hilda wouldn't believe this was just a coincidence. If his weakness was exposed, his political career would surely collapse. Hilda and her assistant went to the surveillance room to question why the security guard wasn't on duty that night, but the guard couldn't give a valid reason or prove his alibi. He had now become the prime suspect. What was even more suspicious was that the security guard repeatedly and urgently requested Sunil to have the ship dock early and disperse the crowd, but he couldn't give any reasonable explanation. Imogene saw Teddy enter Sunil's office. Taking advantage of the moment he left, she used her foot to block the door and quickly sneaked in. She was about to open the safe when she didn't realize Teddy and Sunil were standing right behind her. All of the Collier family's financial records for the past 10 years were locked in the safe in the office. Imogene suspected that Keith had accessed these documents, which was why he was killed. If Sunil agreed to cooperate in solving the case and canceling the agreement, the ship would be allowed to operate again. Sunil had no reason to refuse. The documents also contained audit reports for the past 50 years. The Chun family's words were true. In the last 2 years, the Collier family's financial situation had plummeted. There were many large investment expenditures. They were truly on the verge of bankruptcy. Imogen also discovered a shipping label inside. Inside was a food coloring called graphene that exceeded the permitted level. It not only causes cancer, but also leads to many other diseases. This substance has been banned since 1989. The shipping document doesn't have a date, so it's impossible to prove whether the transaction violated the law. It's also impossible to determine if Keith was murdered by the mastermind because he saw the document. Since the morning Anna parted ways with Layla, she suddenly disappeared all day without a trace. Anna anxiously searched for her throughout the ship. Coincidentally, Anna discovered her mother was having a clandestine affair with the pastor. During this time, Anna was mentally exhausted. Although rumors of the company's collapse weren't unfounded, her family could only revive if they received support from the Chun family. However, due to the unexpected murder, the Chun family temporarily decided to shift their focus to Hong Kong. The two sides are no longer cooperating. Therefore, Anna never secured the CEO position. Her words carried no weight in front of Celia. Meanwhile, Lawrence refused to step forward. If things continued like this, the company would certainly not recover. Anna deliberately reminded Lawrence that he was the one who had approached the Chun family to deal with the mess he had left behind. Only she was qualified to take over the management position. Meanwhile, Imogen sat in a restaurant, drinking heavily, and witnessed Layla taking a dinner night. Recalling Anna's earlier statement that Layla's mental state was increasingly unstable, even hiding a knife under her pillow in her bedroom, Imogene felt uneasy and quietly followed her. Imogene saw Layla secretly take another roll of rope and another knife. Strangely, she disappeared as soon as she turned a corner in the hallway. At the same time, Hilda received news that Jules had been missing for 10 hours. She found a photo of them together, a wad of cash, and his passport hidden in a book in his room. Jules's true identity was that of a wanted deserter. He had a prior criminal record for theft, assault, and telecommunications fraud. It seemed unlikely he could clear himself of murder suspicion in a short time. Imogene stared blankly at the mysterious sealed door. She couldn't figure it out. Then, her eyes were drawn to a small hole in the wall. She inserted her earring into it and unexpectedly discovered a secret door. She went down the stairs, but was restrained by Jules, who covered her mouth. Jules had been hired by Sunil himself. Sunil had never investigated his background. They had known each other for 6 months. When Sunil was robbed in the street, Jules had come to his rescue. Because Sunil wanted to repay him, he hired Jules. Only now did Sunil realize that perhaps those thugs were also Jules' accomplices. So why did Jules deliberately board the yacht? Perhaps there was someone on board he was trying to hide. Hilda ordered everyone on board to remain in their positions. They were only allowed to leave when the threat was resolved. No one, whether a tycoon or a governor, dared defy this judge's orders. Anna felt uneasy. She remembered that Layla wasn't in her room the night of the crime. But when Anna asked where Layla had gone, she stammered and couldn't answer. Clearly, something was being concealed. In truth, Jules wasn't as ruthless as they thought. He knew Imogene had been to the crime crime scene and deleted the CCTV footage, but he'd rather have the police suspect him than implicate her. He had always wanted the ship to dock early because he was hiding a family of illegal immigrants in the hold. They were refugees from Ukraine. Jules always tried his best to help others. With Jules's permission, Imogene visited the 3 members of the family. The girl in the group had rust stains on her pants, indicating she had crawled through the ventilation shaft to board the ship. This meant she might have seen something important. Imogene returned to the ship, leaving a signal for Rufus in the elevator. She nearly ran into Hild, who was checking rooms. Hildy was about to question the lawyer when she discovered the room was empty. The polite lawyer was tied up and locked in a closet. He claimed it was a private matter between the two of them, just a peculiar hobby that didn't affect the law. Even though Hilda locked him in the interrogation room, he refused to say anything more. Rufus saw the signal. Imogene left in the elevator. The two quickly reunited and went down to the basement. Unexpectedly, Sunil and Teddy had secretly followed them. The concealment of the illegal immigrants could no longer be kept secret. If discovered, all the passengers on the ship would be implicated. Imogene guided the girl's memory. In that cramped room, she couldn't sit still for more than 15 minutes. Occasionally, she would crawl onto the ship through the ventilation shaft to observe the luxurious lives of the rich. On the night of the crime, she heard a scream and a loud noise. Then everything became quiet. Then something fell, making a sound. Terrified, the little girl crawled to the side to hide, inadvertently scratching her hand. Looking through the ventilation shaft, she saw 2 feet wearing black high-heeled shoes with metal studs. Only one person on the train wore that type of shoe. In the previous interrogation, that person claimed to have spent the night in the room with Winnie, but the little girl's testimony shattered that person's alibi. In fact, Teddy had another identity. She specialized in providing thrill-seeking services to clients. That night, her client was a lawyer. The wound on the lawyer's hand was the best evidence. The little girl had mistaken the room. Teddy wasn't with Keith. No one knew this, not even Winnie. The lawyer was exonerated, but another question arose. If Teddy had always concealed her identity, why would Winnie lie for her? There was only one possibility. Winnie herself had begged Teddy to lie for her. Rufus deliberately spread the rumor that Teddy was the culprit and then locked her in the interrogation room. Unexpectedly, Winnie lost her composure and proactively confessed to the crime. That night, she hid in a trolley in Keith's room and witnessed Imogene smashing his watch. After Imogene left, Winnie committed murder. The reason was simple. She had been humiliated by him. But was it really that simple? Just then, the police received a report of illegal immigrants. Imogene immediately ran back to the basement for a meeting. With so many police officers, escape was almost impossible. Jules sacrificed himself. He guaranteed to distract the police so Imogene could take the other 3 away. The cruise ship was constantly in turmoil. The governor received another anonymous email. Someone had photographed him and Trip. Rufus found Layla hiding on the deck. When she learned the culprit had been caught, she felt no relief. Instead, she told Rufus that Winnie was merely a stand-in. The real killer was Victor. Keith and Layla had met on the night of the murder. He told her the truth. He was investigating the 18-year-old murder of Imogene's mother. Layla tried to refute him, saying that the Collier family were also victims. She didn't dare name the real killer, because that person could be anywhere and could always hear. And it turned out to be true. The pastor was murdered. As for whether Winnie was used by Victor to commit the crime, she still refused to admit it. Rufus couldn't do anything either. He had to ask others who might know. When Catherine heard Victor's name, she advised him to stop immediately. Otherwise, whatever he did would be useless. Teddy tried to use her older sister's influence to persuade Winnie to tell the truth, but Victor's influence was too strong, and Winnie remained silent. This made Teddy begin to doubt whether, even with someone pulling the strings, her sister alone could have caused such a huge commotion on the yacht. Could there be someone else hiding on the ship acting on Victor's behalf? Layla feared Victor would strike again, so she advised Anna to leave the ship with her. But Anna was only thinking about her family's business and paid no heed to her advice. At that moment, Layla was pulled back into past memories. She had heard that a veteran employee who had worked for 19 years at the National Security Agency was murdered after investigating Victor. People said Victor was very mysterious. Anyone who mentioned his name would be put on a watch list, and one by one, they would be subjected to his insane revenge. At first, Layla didn't believe it, until a few days after participating in the investigation, her car suddenly lost control and plunged into a ravine. That was the same incident from years ago, and the reason she always lived in fear. Anna thought Layla was having a nervous breakdown, so she specifically called a psychologist for online counseling. Layla knew she couldn't change Anna's decision. In recent days, Layla had clearly sensed Anna's lack of trust. She was completely different from the gentle Anna of the beginning. Unable to bear it any longer, Layla suggested a divorce. But a call from her family interrupted their conversation. This meeting was crucial. It directly affected the survival of the Collier family. The Chun family agreed to invest $3 billion billion, but the condition was that Collier had to relinquish 51% of his shares. This condition was nothing short of coercion. Anna intended to end the pointless meeting, but Lawrence, acting as CEO, unilaterally made the decision. He agreed to the deal without allowing Anna to object. Meanwhile, Imogene and Sunil successfully brought their family of 3 to safety. Coincidentally, a close local friend of Sunil's was investigating and could help them track down the toxic shipping company. However, that person was busy and scheduled a meeting for 2 days later. While waiting, Sunil took Imogene on a tour of the local area. Their relationship quickly became close. Sunil frankly admitted that he had always dreamed of owning a cruise ship. He had borrowed money from everywhere to pursue that dream, and by the time he realized it couldn't sustain him, he was bankrupt. On the appointed day, his friend could confidently guarantee he would find the shipper and the shipment time with just a glance, but only on the condition that they bring the shipping documents. Shortly after leaving, they were secretly followed. Disguised, they blended into the crowd and managed to escape onto a cargo truck before being caught. Afterward, they went to the dock, hired a speedboat, and returned to the cruise ship. During this journey, feelings began to blossom between them. Imogene also confessed that her mother had died in a murder 18 years earlier. Unbeknownst to her, Sunil's very existence was part of a conspiracy. Layla's excessive vigilance now became the crucial point. She discovered several miniature cameras hidden in the room. As the yacht's manager, Teddy was certain she had never used such cameras. When they returned to the control room to check the data, they found a world map hanging on the wall. Every place the yacht had been to was marked. Rufus noticed a special symbol on the map. He remembered Layla saying Victor was everywhere. If it were just one person, how could he move so flexibly? But if he was tracking the ship's itinerary, everything made sense. Indeed, the yacht's second deck was a secret space, seemingly Victor's base of operations. Teddy confirmed Rufus's suspicion. In 2021, when Layla was investigating, she saw Victor in Argentina, and coincidentally, the yacht was also sailing nearby. Sunil was definitely connected to Victor. Rufus immediately reported all the clues to Imogene. When Sunil returned to his room, he received a call from Victor. Imogene had witnessed the scene firsthand. Since going bankrupt to keep the yacht running and pursue his dream, Sunil had become an accomplice to Victor. However, all this time, he had only communicated through an intermediary, never meeting Victor in person. That intermediary was the man in the white coat who had been following Imogene and Sunil. Sunil knew about the existence of the second basement level, but didn't care what it was used for. For 5 to 6 years, Victor hadn't asked Sunil to do anything until the day Keith was murdered. At that time, Victor immediately ordered the intermediary to require Sunil to regularly report any activity on the ship. However, Sunil's help to the immigrant family and support for Imogene was completely genuine. After the governor received the anonymous email, she began to suspect that Catherine might know about her affair with Tripp and was deliberately seeking revenge. At one point, she suspected her lawyer had secretly taken her picture. After much deliberation, she realized that no one but the Collier family could have done such a thing. Finally, the governor produced an old file and handed it to Hilda, saying she held enough leverage over Lawrence to send him to prison for life. But when Hilda opened the file, it was completely empty. Just as the governor was about to explain, she suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. In an instant, she died. The killer acted swiftly, cleanly, and precisely, leaving no trace. There was no doubt it was Victor's doing. Hilda surmised that the document the governor had given her wasn't fake, but it had been tampered with at some point. If Victor did this, it must have been to protect the Collier family. Imogene pulled up the governor's sleeve and discovered numerous needle marks on her arm. Since she boarded the ship, Winnie had been the one administering her vitamin injections, meaning she had ample opportunity to carry out the attack. At this point, Winnie no longer hid anything. She said she had never met Victor. In fact, no one had ever met him. A few years ago, Winnie's best friend was murdered by a rubber factory. Victor had sought justice for her. Since then, Winnie had always worked for him. The murders of the governor and the chief were all on Victor's orders. As for the real reason, she didn't know either. The rubber factory Winnie mentioned was owned by the Collier family. It clearly couldn't be a coincidence. When Imogene and the detective returned to the office, Sunil called to report that they had determined the shipping time for the order from that company. It was the same year the murders occurred as Imogene's mother was killed. Imogene argued that Victor discovered Collier's rubber factory contained carcinogens and had repeatedly used this to blackmail her. But because the Collier family was late in paying, Victor decided to commit murder. He chose her mother, then an assistant to the Collier family, to send the first warning. Layla hacked into the surveillance system, accessing data from cameras Victor had installed in every room. This included footage of Anna and Celia's niece, Eleanor, making love. At that moment, the entire cruise ship suddenly lost power and communication was cut off. The backup generator failed to start. The ship, adrift in the ocean, plunged into a desperate night. chaos erupted among the crowd. The lawyer on the deck left Imogene with only a cryptic statement, "I truly love your mother." This was followed by his jump into the sea. That statement remains unanswered, but it's certain the lawyer had a connection to Imogene's mother. 18 years before he was injured, Rufus had questioned him to uncover the truth. Imogene must assume Rufus's perspective and recreate the entire scene from that time. "Since my mother was murdered, the case has been stalled for 6 months without any results." Rufus took on the case solely because he was attracted by the Collier family's billionaire status. He thought he could earn a hefty fee. Imogene's behavior and speech had become increasingly erratic due to the loss of her mother. She rarely communicated with others, trusting only Rufus, whom she believed could uncover the truth about her mother's death. Rufus questioned everyone, and they all spoke highly of Imogene's mother, Kira. No one had any complaints. Kira had raised Imogene, was dedicated to her work, and never dated anyone. The lawyer's feelings for her were unrequited. Keith found Kira's schedule, which showed that a month before her murder, at 5 p.m., she and Imogene had gone to a restaurant together. Kira was a regular customer there, and always ordered the same dish, leaving a strong impression on the chef. A month before the crime, Kira may have had an argument with someone, but Imogene was still young at the time, and her mind had developed a complete defense mechanism, erasing all memory of what happened that day. Rufus tried to guide her to recall, and unexpectedly discovered her hidden observational talent. The investigation lasted over 3 months, but they only found a blurry photograph of Victor. However, the Collier family, citing Imogene's young age and the potential for psychological trauma, refused to cooperate with Rufus. They even warned him through their lawyer that if he continued to bother them, they would take him to court. 3 years later, Rufus and Imogene met again by chance. Only then did she learn that he had never given up the investigation. But the information Rufus could provide was limited. To find the truth, the only way was to uncover the deepest memories within Imogene. She relived the afternoon before the crime, recalling the moment her mother received a phone call and hurriedly left. Imogene followed, but was blocked by a door. But she couldn't remember what was behind the door. The more she wanted to know the truth, the more frustrated she became. Under Rufus's guidance, she returned to the restaurant from years ago. The image of the child who had run away in her memory now resurfaced. She chased after her past self. She tried to observe everything as a third party. The family members were still busy with their daily routines. She crossed the street and entered the restaurant. Unconsciously, she arrived on the very day her mother was murdered. She witnessed her mother fall right before her eyes. Her soul was shattered once again. She realized that her constant running away in her memory was a way of avoiding the truth. This meant that on that day, she might have met someone, but because she wanted to avoid it, she had erased that image from her memory. The forgotten memory unfolded like a film reel. The person behind the door, arguing with her mother, was the governor. Her mother had reported the Collier family's use of carcinogens, and a witness was preparing to testify. Before being murdered, her mother tried to protect Imogene by letting her leave the scene. This is what prevented her from remembering for so many years. But now, all her memories have returned. The witness had a mole on the left side of her face. It was Celia of the Chun family. Imogene calmed down, walked up to Celia, and said that she remembered everything. Going back an hour, Celia saw a couple carrying old photos of Chen Fan, pleading for their useless granddaughter. They urged her to let Anna take over as CEO of the Collier Corporation, but she refused. Immediately afterward, the entire cruise ship lost power, and the scene descended into chaos. Victor took over the entire ship and prepared for his next move. Imogene and Rufus immediately realized that Victor had actually boarded the ship long ago and was hiding under the identity of one of the characters who had appeared. After saying his last words, the lawyer jumped into the sea. The most heartbroken person was probably Teddy. Just a few days before, while caring for him, he had been joking about the wine the waiter brought up having no cork. Through their interactions, Teddy clearly sensed that he was living in constant suffering. Hilda had also experienced something similar. It was like lawyers needing stimulation to fuel their motivation to live. Hilda also had a similar preference. Their relationship had gone beyond the ordinary. Tripp was always haunted by the governor's death because she had previously mentioned the cameras and threats to him. She suspected that Lawrence might be behind it all, but Layla denied that speculation. Victor only hunted down corrupt and rotten people. With Lawrence's abilities and intelligence, he couldn't possibly be that kind of person. Jules flipped his hand to reveal a key. It was the key Imogen had secretly given him before to try his luck. Just as he was about to leave, another waiter rushed in, causing trouble and fighting with him. In a flash, Jules realized that this man and Winnie were both Victor's men. After the yacht lost power, Hilda tried to control the situation, keeping everyone under her watchful eye. But she quickly realized Layla had disappeared. She was hiding in the kitchen, constantly thinking about the lawyer's death. The waiter had used corks from the tables to hide in a container. After he left, Layla opened the container and found countless corks, each with a small hole pierced in it. The lawyer lawyer's death wasn't from jumping into the sea, but from poisoning. There were likely still Victor's men on this ship. Perhaps even Victor himself was here. Sunil knew how to activate the backup generator, but it was too late. Victor could hack into the ship's systems and infiltrate the communication equipment. Every action of each person was under his control. The lawyer had worked for the Collier family for decades, but Lawrence didn't seem at all upset. Even when Hilda wanted to speak to him, Lawrence refused. After all, with Lawrence's wealth, it was easy for him to bring down a police officer, so he didn't think much of Hill. The Chun and Collier families gathered again to discuss corporate affairs. Catherine strongly recommended Anna, saying she was capable and the head of Collier. Anna could completely replace Lawrence. But Celia found it ridiculous, because she had already investigated and found out that Anna was not Lawrence's biological daughter. Anna's true identity was the result of a brief affair between the recently deceased lawyer and Kira. Over a decade ago, the lawyer had always loved Kira, but she rejected him. During that time of grief, Catherine comforted him. They developed feelings for each other, and Anna was born from that. Catherine never thought she had done anything wrong. She gave Anna a comfortable life, a good life, and even the Collier family. This was a status others could only dream of. At the same time, Imogene sought out Celia to inquire about something from her past. 50 years ago, she had worked in a factory. She and a male colleague fell in love and had a daughter. But 10 years later, the Collier family took over the factory and imported a new dye called graphene. Her husband, unfortunately, died from the poisoning. To conceal the truth, Lawrence gave her a large sum of money to keep it a secret. She used the money to start her own company. 20 years later, Kira approached her, inviting her to collaborate to expose the true face of the Collier family. Kira then died tragically in a car explosion. Thinking back, it's possible Lawrence was behind this brutal assassination. Imogene couldn't contain her anger. She confronted Lawrence, who was standing alone by the train tracks. He suddenly appeared confused. He even mistook her for Kira, the deceased. It turned out Lawrence was suffering from senile dementia. Decisions like not announcing Anna's takeover or agreeing to cooperate with the Chun family were all made while he was not in his right mind. He might not even be aware of what he was doing. Asking for the truth from someone who is clearly losing their senses is not a good approach. Imogene had to imitate her mother's mannerisms to approach Lawrence. It turned out that 18 years ago, he had secretly loved Kira, but Kira was determined to expose the secret of the Jianan dye. To protect his family, Lawrence was forced to make a phone call. Kira's death was indeed connected to him. Teddy had told Hilda about the corpse. They examined the body, recovered from the sea, and found barbiturates. The governor also had this poison on him. The waiter had no way out and was forced to confess that he was addicted to a guest's order to deliver wine to a designated room, and that guest looked exactly like Anna's mother. Meanwhile, Hilda also speculated that Catherine might be Victor. Rufus comforted Imogene, saying that all she did was want her mother back, but everyone knew that was impossible. Just then, a scream rang out, and everyone rushed to the scene. Unexpectedly, Catherine was dead in the swimming pool. A helicopter circled above the yacht, but Hilda hadn't sent any rescue request. A group of people who had just disembarked immediately knocked Hilda unconscious and delivered Victor's new order. Everyone on board had to participate in a survival game. Sunil and Jules, while investigating in the ship's hold, discover a time bomb. Hearing the commotion on the ship, Sunil told Jules to hide. He himself was captured by Victor's henchmen. For Victor, the ugly world today was caused by the wealthy. Some had paid the price, like the governor, like Catherine. The henchmen released Rufus and the other innocent people. The remaining wealthy individuals, if they wanted to survive, had to secure a spot on the helicopter provided by Victor. There were only 9 seats, and the highest bidder would be rescued. They had only 1 hour left. After that, the entire ship would be blown up. The Chun family's $30 billion investment in the Collier family had just been transferred. The Collier family now had 5 members, and $30 billion was enough to buy all the escape spots. But Anna didn't heed Tripp's advice. Instead, she wore a strange smile. The lifeboats and private planes had been confiscated. The helicopter was heavily guarded. Besides participating in Victor's deadly game, there was no other option. However, even Sunil's group combined wouldn't have enough money. Without Rufus's help, Imogene didn't know what to do. The Chun family had 8 members on board. With Celia's wealth, buying all 9 seats wouldn't be difficult. But she didn't want to participate in a survival game only for the rich. She even comforted her granddaughter, saying that everything would work out. 40 minutes remained. The price for an escape spot had been driven up to $10 billion. Eleanor secretly approached the henchmen, volunteering to be their bidder. She announced to the outside world that the price had increased to $15 billion. This would encourage others to continue bidding higher. In return, she only needed to keep 1 spot for herself. Imogene arrived at the office to investigate. For years, Victor had lived off extortion and then turned to serial murder. There must be a reason. If he truly wanted to punish the rich, the first person to die, Keith, wasn't rich. watch. Why was he killed? Was it because he saw something he shouldn't have seen? It's very possible he saw Victor. As she finished speaking, she turned to leave but was spotted by one of the henchmen. She had stolen a designer watch. But that was just a diversion. What Imogene really wanted was Keith's diary. The diary was full of code, so she needed to decipher each page. Time was running out. Tripp had a close friend who planned to hijack a helicopter to escape, but the risks were too great. Tripp didn't want to participate. He wanted to use $30 billion to buy a safe escape spot for himself and his sister. Unexpectedly, when his henchmen checked the Collier family's assets, they discovered the account only had less than $900,000 left. A few minutes earlier, the pastor had tricked Lawrence into signing a property transfer agreement. A senile man like Lawrence couldn't possibly see through such a scheme. The $30 billion had been stolen by the pastor to buy a spot on the helicopter. Tripp would never have imagined that the pastor, who had worked for the family for so many years, would betray him like this. In the face of death, people's true nature is always revealed. Tripp had no choice but to agree to his friend's plan. They searched the entire room to find his sister's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Imogene and the others paid no heed to their actions. Tripp is untrustworthy when it comes to money, but his feelings for his sister are genuine. If Anna can't leave, he won't leave either. Only 15 minutes remain. Imogene finally deciphered Keith's diary. One sentence caught her attention. At noon on the day he boarded the ship, he saw someone whose name wasn't on the crew list. Who was that person? The writing wasn't clear, but perhaps the person he saw was Victor. That's why he was eliminated and his diary stolen. Imogene tried to recall that day, but she couldn't remember. Who else was near Keith at that time? But there was someone who might have recorded everything. The influencer's phone was still in the pastor's possession. Victor's true face was about to be revealed. By the time the henchmen announced the results, someone could have bought up all the seats to leave. But that didn't mean this person thought they had any more reason to survive than others. That person, Celia, was the winner of the game. A group of people sneaked up to the helicopter area. There was no one guarding it. They successfully stole the helicopter, and before they could even cheer, the plane exploded and shattered into pieces. At the same time, Imogene discovered that behind the secret door in the main office was the real Victor. It turned out that before anyone reported to the International Police Organization, Agent Hilda was already on the ship. The person Keith saw was her. Therefore, he had to die. This ship belonged to Hild. Half of the crew members were her people. Hild killed the governor to scare her. Hilda killed Lawrence so he would feel the pain of losing a loved one. Hild exploited Catherine's desire for excitement to force the lawyer to drink alcohol containing barbiturates. It was all part of Hilda's scheme. Everything is connected to the murder that happened 18 years ago. Or rather, it was a setup, because Hilda's true identity is Imogene's mother, Kira. Meanwhile, another explosion occurs. Tripp finds Anna desperately clinging to Catherine's body. He struggles to convince her to leave. Imogene follows Kira's footsteps and boards a lifeboat. The truth about the past is finally revealed. As before, from Imogene's perspective, Kira continues to gather evidence about the graphene dye. Lawrence wants to hire someone to eliminate her, but she cleverly thwarts the plan. Lawrence will certainly not let her go, so Kira enlists the help of a friend to help her cross the border. She also arranges a false identity. To live under this new identity, she must abandon her entire past, including her daughter. To avoid suspicion from the Collier family, she pulls out her own teeth to leave behind DNA. Finally, she says a few words to her daughter. While the girl turned her back and walked away, the woman climbed into a parked truck nearby and started the engine. That was the whole truth of that year. Afterward, she used Victor's identity to eliminate all the malignant tumors causing social unrest with money. Imogene finally understood why no one had been able to uncover Victor's true identity all this time. It turned out Kira owned a large factory that could access and install servers all over the world. That's why she could appear everywhere. And the people on the cruise ship weren't actually dead. Kira had arranged for another ship to be rigged with bombs, just to scare people, not to kill them. Even so, Imogene couldn't accept her mother's actions. Although she had stopped many powerful people, she had also harmed many innocent people. It was all over now. Just as Rufus had said, Imogene only wanted her mother back and to start over. Kira agreed, and they enjoyed 6 months of intimacy together. But behind her back, she still hadn't given up extorting money from the powerful. Since Catherine's death, Anna has completely changed. Layla sees this, but despite her heartbreak over the divorce, she hasn't changed her mind. Lawrence's condition is worsening. Every time he drinks his blue milkshake, he demands a separate straw. Winnie hasn't contacted him since she left. As his sister, Teddy doesn't know how to maintain their relationship. Imogene calls Rufus and gets straight to the point. Hild has punished so many people, so why is Lawrence, the instigator of this tragedy, still alive? There's only one answer. Hild's punishment of him wasn't simply blackmail or murder. About 2.5 years ago, Hild devised a way to change Lawrence's daily milkshake recipe to blue. The main ingredient was graphene, the substance that caused Lawrence's illness to develop slowly. Before the ship exploded, Teddy and everyone else secretly moved the ship's server system. They monitored Hild's every move and discovered she never stopped. Hild clutched the gun hidden under the table, believing she was still in control. But while she was talking to the police, the investigation team raided her warehouse. Teddy, Sunil, and others were already prepared to testify in court. The gun under the table had been replaced by a bodyguard. The area was surrounded by plainclothes police officers. It was over. Teddy, a level 5 accomplice, would also face prison time. Imogene and Jules grew closer, their feelings deepening. Layla worried that Anna couldn't handle everything on her own, so she hadn't filed for divorce yet. But no one suspected that Anna was secretly meeting with Hild's henchmen. In truth, that day Anna had confronted Catherine, questioning why she used graphene and covered up Kira's death. But Catherine showed no remorse. She argued that the Collier family had provided Imogene with a life of wealth, and that Imogene should be grateful, not defy them. During the argument, Anna grabbed an object and struck Catherine, killing her instantly in the pool. Afterward, Hilda approached Anna and instructed her to follow the script's subsequent events. Now that Hilda has been captured, Anna will be in charge of contacting the organization. Meanwhile, Imogene's group discovers a mutilated body at the ski resort. It seems things aren't over yet. The murder in the locked room at sea likely has a sequel. It can be speculated that Victor isn't an individual, but an organization. After Kira's capture, others will continue to carry out the organization's plan. Anna will become one of them. This film has come to an end. Thank you for watching, goodbye, and see you again.